So today we're going to be looking at two versions of Dash that we're going to play into Bravo Star of the show. The first one that we're going to review right now is going to be an aggro version of the deck, which is going to be very low to the ground. It's going to be focused mostly on going wide with multiple attacks with Go Again. They're going to be buffed because of a new card from Everfest called Tekla Pounder. Tekla Pounder says that it is a once per turn effect. Whenever you boost a card, you remove a steam counter from it, and then the attack gets +2. And you can do it 3 times, and then the Tekla Pounder is destroyed. So it's not a very good card, but it does enable a sort of go wide strategy with Dash, which we're going to be trying out. Because the current question is like, how do you beat, we're just going to call it Starvo for the video. How do you beat Starvo? And so as a Dash player, there's 2 avenues. You can either play a hyper aggressive boost strategy, or you can play the more traditional grindy sort of control pistol variant. And so for this video, we're going to try out both, right? So for the first game, we're going to be playing the aggro version. I've actually already recorded this, and I messed up because I had the video I had the playback in OBS, so I'm new to this, and I didn't notice any audio coming through. I didn't check the mixer, and the mixer would have shown me that actually the media source was playing audio. And so this video is already on the channel, so you already know how noisy and chaotic it is. And so I opened up the video after recording it. Of course, I'm trying to give thoughtful commentary. I'm double talking over the actual audio, and there's no way to fix it. So this is the second time we're running through this, unfortunately. But to recap, so I already know most of what I'm going to say. So a quick turn by turn. We're speeding this up also for my own sake, because now I have to go back and redo both of these games. We're just pitching. We're going first. We're just pitching all of our cards into Tekla Plasma Pistol. You are able to actually endlessly pitch into it. You pay 1. It'll check if you have a steam counter. If you don't, it'll put a steam counter on it. If you do have a steam counter, it will not give a steam counter. So we want to deny the Bravo player the ability to sculpt their hand, right? Because if we attack and they have a couple cards for the fuse, but they don't have all of them, they can just block with the bad cards in their hand and just redraw and hopefully hit the fuse for their first turn. So we just want to deny them that. So if you just pitch to your pistols, or the pistol, right? We don't have induction chamber, then that's probably good enough for turn 1. Ideally, turn 1 for us in this deck is being able to find a Tekla core or another Tekla Pounder and play those and pass. That would be optimal. Didn't happen. It's fine. But yeah, so to recap my thoughts on this, I think a very important thing, if you're going to play both versions, right, is understanding how the combat chain works because of Ram Shield. Ram Shield is so brutal into Tekla Pistol because you have to close the chain every time you reload it, because the reload action itself is a non-attack action. So when you do it, the combat chain will close. Ram Shield will reset on the board. They can reblock with it and then pay 1 more. So the problem is that let's say you come in for 2, right, into Starvo. Let's say you have a traditional version of Dash, where you're playing the pistol, induction chamber, Go Again, and pistol for 2, right? The problem is they'll Ram Shield block for 1. They'll pay 1 to Crown of Seeds, right? And they're pitching a blue to do this. So they have 1 left floating. It's what they wanted to do anyway. You give Go Again. You have to close the chain to reload the pistol. The Ram Shield goes back. You attack with the pistol 1 more time. They block with the Ram Shield. They pay the 1 that's left over. And now the Ram Shield blocks for 2. So you did 0 damage, right? So playing boost Dash. Oh yeah, and this is important, right? This is going to go by quick because the playback speed is so fast, but my opponent is going to Oaken ult here, double fused. And at first I think about blocking, but the problem is I'm playing an aggro version of Dash, and I kind of look at my hand and I'm like, what am I doing by blocking 3, right? I have no D-reacts in Arsenal. I'm not stopping this hit effect. There's almost no reason for me to actually try to mitigate damage. Or I might as well just hopefully keep a 2-card hand that's good enough to come back with. Now the problem is we get stuck with 2 T-bones, which is a liability here. And unfortunately, like the Frostbite from Winter's Wail just like made this like not worth it to me. So I decided to just block, take one in a Frostbite, and then keep a blue and pitch it and just like put a counter on pistol and pass. Part of aggro dash is going to be like hand evaluation. You're going to look at your hand, you're going to see how much damage it's going to do, and then you're going to look at what your opponent's doing, and you're basically going to say like, can I match this or can I not, right? And unfortunately with like aggro decks in Flesh and Blood right now, you just have to kind of hope that on average your deck will just output more and you'll just like high roll better. So a lot of the times you're just going to kind of say like, just going to kind of say like no blocks on things and just hope it works out. But for something like aggro dash, like you can still have a little bit of hand evaluation. But yeah, so just learn how the combat chain works, especially because you're going to be using things like Foundry Heart very often. So this deck has a 100% ratio of mech cards. So Foundry Heart is always a guaranteed resource. The problem is that you have to know when it's a bad idea to close a combat chain. Also, because of cards like Payload and Overblast, which we have in our arsenal right now. We run 3 reds and 3 blues. I actually like the card a lot. It feels more playable than Maximum Velocity, but because of cards like that, it wants every other card that's been boosted on the chain. So the problem is if you close the chain, then actually those cards lose their value. So you have to be very, very careful. And you have to know like when do you actually have the safety of closing the chain, even more so in something like Starvo, right? And so this is just me like choosing to save armor for only the big effects, right? This will be very, very important in the control game that I play into the same like into a very similar list. They're both the aggro versions of Starvo. But you just kind of have to save your life total as best as you can, because late game dominate will always threaten to close out the game, and hammer for 4 if you're at 1 is probably the most punishing thing you can ever think of. Outside of I guess like Kodachi's or like, I mean, hey, we're playing a degenerate weapon too, okay? Don't get it twisted. Like we're playing Tekla Pistol. Like late game, that card is like absolutely brutal and completely backbreaking. But we're just choosing to save armor here, and we're just gonna say like, okay, if the card is not awake, and this will be very, very important for the control version, right? The control version is gonna be the same, like the same philosophy of playing the game, except you're gonna add an additional layer with like unmovable and D-reaction, and tell yourself like, hey, if the card doesn't say Crippling Crush, if it doesn't say Spinal Crush, and if it doesn't say Oakenold, we are not using armor, right? Like the problem is not all the decks or not all the cards are going to be equal in Starvo. You're going to have a lot of like very bad cards from the Aria set. You're going to have like horrible cards like Autumn's Touch and like Evergreen, just these vanilla attacks that are unfortunately strong in Starvo, right? Because they have Go Again and they have Dominate and they have +2. Like, deck's kind of cracked, but it's not as effective. Okay, so this is really important, right? We just talked about not closing the chain. So I know I'm going to play Overblast this turn. I know I can boost 3 times. But if I close the combat chain, Overblast itself is going to lose all of that, right? So the important thing was the Goliath Gauntlet. So the Goliath Gauntlet is a non-attack action. It would actually close the chain. So if I like boosted 3 times, use Goliath Gauntlet to buff Overblast, I would actually lose the +3 from the 3 times I boosted this turn on the chain. So I actually activate Goliath Gauntlet at the very beginning, and the effect is there, and the effect is not going to play until after I play the 2 or more attack. So I'm just like boosting with 1s and 0s, and then I'm able to come in with the Overblast for 10. My opponent goes to 1. They decide to greed. I can kind of read their hand here, so I know that they're trying to keep something. So I actually decided that moment to break the Achilles boots and get an action point so I can pistol in, because I'm basically like, okay, you're keeping a card in hand, like give me one of those cards, like I need to shut down your turn. My opponent actually is able to like come back with like a pretty decent turn, even though I did like pressure on the spot 1 more card from them, which was like me punishing my opponent for being greedy and going to 1. Like if they blocked with 1 more card from hand, I would not have used Achilles there, but going to 1 meant that like there was a very obvious reason they did it, and using Achilles like demands a card from them. But Channel Lake into Hammer is like very, very good. But most of this game has just been me like knowing when it's fine to block. Like there have been some very bad hands in here, like hands that are just mostly concentrated with blues or like low attacks, like T-Bone. A bit of review I had looking at this is I would probably go back and I'd probably remove T-Bone in this matchup, and I probably would remove High Octane. The problem is High Octane is already like rough enough in the Guardian, and when you're playing this boost version that doesn't even have Purifier, it's just like there's no reason to, right? Like Ram Shield locks it out like immediately, and Payload is like such a joke in a Guardian. It was only in there because it's a 0 boost, but like even then, like the cards are just so lowly, like they're very like bad, right? Like the red is a 0 for 3, the yellow is a 0 for 2, and the blue is a 0 for 1. You're never spiking equipment against Starvo. It will not happen. Sorry to tell you. Like, so it's tough, right? My opponent does have null rune boots this game. That was a mistake from the deck that they imported in. So these are Ironhides. They will be used as Ironhides. The game will not be determined because my opponent had null rune boots. So in case you're wondering, another thing to be careful. My opponent told me halfway through the game they were not using Awakening in this matchup, which I guess makes sense if you're maybe assuming that the dash is going to be on control. But some Starvo players out there are going to be greedy and they're going to like Awakening because it's a big dumb card that is like obnoxiously overpowered, and they're gonna play it into you. And if you're playing Boost Dash for some reason, like you are just gonna get absolutely blown out in that game. I guarantee it. So yeah, you gotta be careful. You gotta be careful. You just gotta hope that the Starvo doesn't high roll you as hard as you want to high roll them with Dash. That's pretty much how the matchup is gonna go. You're mostly just going to want to be as aggressive as possible. Know when to block. Know when it's an off turn. Know when your opponent has an off turn. And then mostly just be very careful with the combat chain. This won't be universal for all decks, but specifically into Starvo, because of Ram Shield, you can punish them very hard, right? Like, so my opponent thought they were dead. I pointed out that because of the Ram Shield, even though I have 3 action points, I actually sort of miss lethal here, although we said they had Ironhide boots, so it wouldn't have mattered because they actually could have used the 1 to pay. But I was basically like, no, actually no, I didn't miss lethal. The problem was that, yeah, so that's a really good example. I missed lethal because I didn't load the pistol before going off with all the boost attacks, so I boosted all these times, and my opponent blocked his shield halfway along that combat chain. The problem is, I would have to close the combat chain to reload the pistol, which then meant that my opponent got shield back and then could block 2. I would reload again. They could, like, the chain would reset. They don't have to pay anymore, and they just block 2, block 2, block 2, and I can't kill them. If I loaded the pistol before, then while the chain was still open, I could have attacked with the pistol. So it's a misplay. Miss lethal. That's why it's really, really crucial to understand how to navigate the combat chain into Guardian, specifically any deck that's going to run Rampart, right? Like, card's good. Card's good. Card can lock out pistols so efficiently. So you just have to know how to use it, right? Like, you have to know how to navigate on that combat chain. You have to know when it's the right time. You have to know when it's okay to close a combat chain. You also have to know how to punish them, right? Like, if they get like super greedy and they think they're going to get a bunch of value out of Ram Shield, and they block with it first on the combat chain, you can actually keep the combat chain open if you pistoled, and then boost, and the Ram Shield is like locked all the way on the first chain link, right? Like they can't like reblock with the Ram Shield. So they're gonna have like resources floating. They used a card from hand to block for 1. I mean, they probably crown, right? But like, so you can punish them pretty hard. And this is where we were just like, no, it's Ironhide boots. Like, you're good. Like, you don't die this turn. But at this point, I'm feeling like pretty confident. Like, my life total is just so high. Like, and my opponent is just completely on the back foot. There's just like, the only question is just like, will I be able to like hit enough breakpoints to actually get there? And luckily for us, we have 2 reds in this hand that both attack for 4. So those 2 cards alone are going to demand our opponent's entire hand. So anything after that is lethal. And we had 2 resources left over from the Tekla Court, so it was just perfect. It was like a perfect way to close out the game. So after this, we're going to look really quickly at the control version of this. There's a lot of things that went poorly in that game. And I'll kind of talk about that, and then I'll still like reinforce what the optimal play strategy is into Starvo with the control version of Dash. Because I actually do think it's probably more consistent. This felt like a very fun variance version of Dash. Have to try it out more. Maybe it actually is the right call for the current meta, but like I just wasn't sure, right? Like maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but yeah, we'll jump into the Control Starvo game. So okay, so here is the control version of Dash into aggro Starvo. There's going to be a few things that are going to be different. Basically, we're going to try not to boost. We're not really going to ever care about using Foundry Heart. We're going to be focused on playing D reactions in order to kind of shut down like the big turns from Starvo. They're probably going to take a lot of damage to set up some of these like bigger hands. And also we have probably the best end game possible out of like most other like Flesh and Blood decks because of the combination of pistol items that this deck can assemble. So for anyone who's not super familiar, there are items that you can play in Dash that if you pay resources into, permanently buff your weapons for the turn and also give your weapon go again, which then allows your weapon to attack multiple times because your weapon does not have a once per turn action effect, attack action effect. So actually things like Induction Chamber give your pistol go again, which actually allows it to attack a second time, which is really cool. So if you played like 2 Induction Chambers, you can actually attack with your pistol 3 times. Plasma Purifier is a card that buffs your pistol by 1 for the whole turn. And that includes every attack, right? So like late game, we're trying to get 2 of each item out. So it allows us to attack for 4 because we buff it up from 2 3 times, which is crazy. And you can do this with blues, right? And so we're just trying to get to that end game while controlling our life total and trying not to die in the process. And so we're going to use a lot of defense reactions and things like that. Very early in the game, like this is very important, right? Our opponent gets very lucky. They get Oakenol double fused. We have 4 unmovables in the deck right now. You need to put those in Arsenal, and you need to tell yourself, under no other circumstance will I play this card, unless if it's to block Crippling Crush, Spinal Crush, or like Oakenol, right? Like those are the best cards in Starvo, both the control version and the aggro version, right? Especially in the aggro version, because the other cards they're going to play are going to be like vanilla damage cards from Tales of Aria, which are just not good. Like Autumn's Touch for 9, it's just not effective. It does leak damage, but like you're okay with it. So the game strategy is going to be trying to find a way to get these pistol items out. And then, I mean, this is crazy. Like just double Oakenol, right? Like I said, like there were things that went well and there were things that went like horribly wrong in this game. We unfortunately kind of low rolled on a lot of our stuff. We were just unable to so that was good. That was good on our part, right? Like that was clean. That was good. That has my full stamp of approval. That's a good play, right? We want to save armor. We don't want to use it unless if it's on those like very big attacks. I forgot. I think that one was only for 9. It was not double fused, so I was mistaken. And now we're able to Spark of Genius to actually go tutor for a pistol item. Unfortunately, this is the last time we will pretty much see a pistol item for the rest of the game. This was because of a few unfortunate reasons. The first being that our pistol items were on the bottom of our deck. And every other time that we drew Spark of Genius, we actually just saw 2 of them. We had to use one to pitch for the other. And the next one that we'll get, which is the third one, unfortunately, was caught in a hand with 2 defense reactions that are both reds and a yellow. So just like it just wasn't really possible for us to use it. With that spoiler out of the way, we still had a close game. And I think it can show that like I actually feel like the strategy is probably more consistent than Boost Dash. So our opponent is getting like very aggressive, actually using the pulse to attack with a hammer for 8, which is definitely a play, and you have to respect it. You have to be careful of stuff like that. You don't want to let your life total drop too low. The way I kind of put it is that you kind of want to walk the life total down with the Starvo player. You just kind of want to like always be keeping somewhat. You want to be like somewhat consistent with your damage against them. Because the worst thing that can happen is the life total gap gets too big. You can eventually mitigate that in Dash, like by getting the pistol items out. But the problem is that what will happen is that late game, you'll drop really low, and the Starvo player will have an off turn, right? They'll have a turn where they just like don't get the fuse, or they just have a fuse but like no good attack cards in hand, and so they just like will hammer for 4. sometimes even without a frostbite, which will happen. And I mean, it happened in the last game too. Like there was a hammer for 4 with no frostbite that we just like gladly took. So you have to be like really careful with stuff like that. The problem is that if the life total gap is too high, they'll have an off turn and you'll actually have a turn to do something. But if they have a good hand to come back and pretty much like close out the game, they just won't block, right? So that's an unfortunate reality. And that's why you actually do have to be proactive with like keeping your life total like pretty close to theirs, which is easier said than done, right? So we end up just taking the frostbite because we have 2 blues in hand. We're able to basically pay through the frostbite like very efficiently, and we also have tackle core, which is like even crazier. So we're just gonna try to like get some damage in. We're gonna be on average we're gonna be getting 2 damage in against Starvo right now, because we'll attack with a pistol for 3 if we use Purifier for twice, right? So we'll come in for 6. The first time they'll block with Ram Shield for 1 and Crown for 2. So they'll take 1 damage, and then the second pistol shot will close the chain, and then they'll pay for the Ram Shield to go up to 3, at which point for the Ram Shield to go up to 2, and then they'll take 1. So you're on average doing 2 damage a turn to the Starvo player, which is just, it's okay for the short term. You definitely don't want to be there forever, right? And that's why we want the pistol items. Unfortunately, it just didn't happen this game. So, but this is where you can still catch them off, right? Like, they go to block with the shield, you keep the combat chain open, and then you like attack with like a boost attack, and they can't get value out of the shield, especially if you're gonna like end the game with that. You're just denying them the ability to like efficiently block out your pistol. And this is really good too, right? We have like 2 solid red boost attacks. And I'm kind of looking at that, and it's like, well, my opponent is 15 life ahead of me, but like a blue pitches for red throttle and red zipper hit alone, and that's 11 damage, right? Like plus like 2 pistol shots, and all of a sudden like we've almost like closed the gap on our opponent. So I just decided to take the damage there, and just hope that I can actually like close it out here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pistol. They're going to block with shield and crown most likely. And then when the combat chain's still open, I'm going to boost twice and basically catch them out with shield. And I'm going to deny them like 2 points of blocking with shield itself. I mean, you do need to be careful though. This was a very risky play because number 1, you can boost a pistol item. And number 2, you can boost a defense reaction, which is already bad enough, but you'll have to use your Achilles to get your action point back. The reason why I felt like this was okay is because the life total was dropping so significantly on me. I needed to do this to get back in the game, or else like I was going to lose, right? So you have to know how to play to your out sometimes. Like this is great, right? Like we like get cards out of their hand. We know they're not fusing. And then we're still threatening to get 1 point of damage in with the pistol afterwards. We maybe could have actually just like not risked boosting twice. It was already risky enough to boost once. I actually could see an argument that we just like play zipper it for 5 with no go again. And we just like accept the fact that we're like leaving 2 resources hanging. I don't really know. But I mean, the ability to like keep 2 resources to like pistol is like honestly like pretty good. And we just like, we just choose to end. That makes sense, right? Like, oh no, we don't. Yeah. It's getting 1 point, right? So we got their whole hand. We actually got through a good amount of damage that turn. And so they're probably just going to arsenal and pass, right? Like they could hammer, but they probably don't want to because like not having the ability to crown is like huge. So, and this is the dreaded hand I was talking about. We finally got Spark of Genius, which the second Purifier is pretty much what makes or breaks the Guardian matchup. Having the pistol come in for 4 instead of 3 is huge, right? Because it means that the first time with crown and shield, it hits them for 2. And it means the second one hits them for 2 as well. So even through like their most efficient blocking, through taking 4 damage a turn, with just a couple blues in our hand. But unfortunately, I just didn't want to risk not having a defense reaction in Arsenal. And we'll actually see that it was the correct thing to do, but I don't know if I went back in time, if I should have just went for the Purifier. But they did have a double fused, or sorry, not double fused. They had a Bravo fused Crippling Crush, right? That is massive. And that would have completely blown us out. except for the fact that we still had armor, which we talked about earlier. Like, you just want to save the armor for these attacks. These are probably the most threatening ones in the deck, and they are limited. They can only have so many, and you just want to keep defense reactions in arsenal. So I understand the line that I took there. It was just very punishing, right? Like, if that yellow, the worst thing was the yellow in the hand, right? Because we had 2 defense reactions. We didn't really need it. Like, we could have just like blocked to the 3 block from hand there and like maybe had to use armor. But if that, like, I think it was a yellow 0 to 60. If that was a blue, we could have pitched that in one of the, in like the sink below, and actually had X for 2. We had 4 resources, double X, and then like paid 2 to go find the second purifier. That was horrible timing. That was just bad variance, right? Like, if that was, and we have a high blue count, so if that was a blue, we would have actually been able to still have the defense reaction arsenal for the crippling crush, and we actually would have been able to have the extra pistol item out. So this was just like a very unfortunate game where like things just like barely didn't go our way, but we were still able to have like a pretty close game. I just think it's more consistent in the boost version, just because you just have like a very strong inevitable end game. And I just think that like boost dash is just too easy to trip over in terms of damage, because your blue count is already naturally like pretty high in that deck. I think unfortunately you will have moments where like you will just draw like all blue hands, which into some other aggro decks like in the meta just don't really exist, right? Like, I mean, you can get caught with like bad hands in Chain. You can get caught with bad hands in Viscera. I think it's possible, but those decks just have more outs to use them. Like, Viscera will still find a way to like go off and do crazy damage with like 4 blues in a way that just like Dash has no ability to at all. So, you know, it's tough. So this is just pretty standard now. We have some pistol items set up. We're just going to slam dunk the immovable and arsenal again. We're just chipping damage through. We've actually closed the gap decently, but unfortunately we're just too low now. Like, it just gets hard when you're underneath 10 life. And now it's like too late for us to set up pistol items because we're just going to lose too much life in the process. Like, at this point, you just kind of like read the writing on the wall and you're like, yeah, the game's probably done. Unless my opponent just bricks like 5 times in a row. Which, I mean, on aggro Bravo, is very possible. Like, they will just have horrible, horrible hands, and you will just have to learn how to capitalize on that. So my opponent's coming in for, I think it's 7 here with Dominate and Go again. It's like the worst version of Evergreen. And at any other point in the game, we don't care. But unfortunately, like, we are low enough that like we do kind of need some damage prevention. It's definitely not correct to use the immovable here, even though that is kind of tempting, right? Because we could cover the whole hit, and then we could like sink below and then like go to Archer and just Arsenal another sink below. I do see the appeal in that, but I just think that like you just can't risk the on hits, right? Because like, imagine if like Oakenold is an X attack, right? Like, sure, like you may only take like 2 damage from Oakenold, like if you have like sink below and Arsenal or something, but the problem is that like you're still losing your whole hand. Like, that's the biggest issue. You're still losing your whole hand, unfortunately, because of the on hit. Like, it doesn't really care how much damage it did. Like, if it does 1, like, you still lose your whole hand. So I just decided that it's just better. I deliberated on this for a while. Like, we were watching this in almost ×2 speed, and even then, like, I just had trouble figuring out what I was doing exactly. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how do I start getting the life total low enough that like the pistols matter? Because what you ultimately want to get to is you want to get to a state in the game where the pistols are like threatening lethal, and so you're actually able to pretty much like lock out your opponent with them. And so I was trying to figure out like how do we get there, right? And my thought process was just using 2 sink belows here to just like cover up 8 points of damage and take a couple. And just like pitch a yellow and play payload for 6, right? Because I mean, it is good into Guardian. It's good into Ram Shield, because like the Ram Shield is a card that very much gets value off of go wide strategies that close the chain, which is like honestly kind of Dash, but at the same time, Dash can work around cards like Shield because your pistol can just go so tall that they're just leaking damage every turn from it. And so we just decided to come in for 6, just like try to close it, because like they could only block for 2 in one instance, right? So they end up just taking all the damage because they had a red lightning surge in Arsenal. And sometimes we would just choose not to block it, but that was a point where we needed to. And they had the fuse too, so like it was tough because they get to go like lightning surge and then like 9 with Dominate. So brutal. Like you can just get high rolled so hard against this deck. Like the game is done at this point, right? Like there's really no way out. Their life total is just so high. Like they could probably just say like no blocks here, and they had a perfect hand with dominate, and like we lose. So like it's tough. Not really a whole lot you can do. You just have to hope that you can get lucky on the control version and not get like completely screwed on hands with pistol items, which unfortunately did happen for us. And you also have to, because like here's the problem, right? Like now we're at the very bottom of the deck. We're past second cycle, or I guess we're about to enter it. Maybe I don't even know. But now we're finally seeing the pistol items, right? And this is like the worst one. Like you do not care about second induction chamber before second purifier into Guardian, because the problem is that like you go too wide and you close the combat chain too many times with induction chamber, and so they just block out with Ram Shield. You'll just hit a point where like attacking the pistol doesn't make sense because they're just able to completely block out the pistol every time you shoot it after that. So getting the second induction chamber before the second purifier was really tough. That was like another point of variance in this game where it's just kind of like, that's unfortunate. Like it won't be like that every game obviously, but some games it will be. There's only so much you can do. And we actually block out 14, which is crazy. Doesn't matter, but like, I mean, come on, we blocked out for 14. It's sick. Like, how are you not into that? So, and I mean, their threats are numbered. They only will have so many in this deck. Oh my god, it's so rough. But this was actually just an Oakenold with no fuse, which is kind of crazy because we probably would have lost if that was the case. But this is actually pretty good for us, right? We're able to stay in the game a lot longer because now we actually get to like clear the item out of our arsenal. We now have a better end game, and now we have a red immovable in there. It's like actually pretty solid. So this game actually does go on longer than I think it probably should have. Like this is just a crippling crush for like 11, no dominate, no fuse. So it's like actually like pretty cool that we're able to stay in the game. I take it back. And then I get tripped up on this because I'm like trying to figure out the best line. At this point, I want to threaten lethal because it's going to require like, it's now going to require cards out of my opponent, even if they don't want to, right? So like this is like the ideal scenario to be in. But this couldn't really get there this game, you know? So it was tough. And so I'm mostly just like deliberating on which line allows me to get to 6 damage the most effectively. And I think I choose to block with the red 0 to 60, yeah, because yellow pitch on pistol allows me to go like pistol, induction chamber, and then zipper hit with possibly one more pistol shot left in me. But the problem is like for 2 it doesn't really get around ram shield, right? But my opponent decides not to block with ram shield, which is like pretty big, but unfortunately like just not enough here, right? So at this point I'm like counting the number of D reactions because I want to see if I can start safely boosting. But we also still have the last purifier in the deck, which is another like liability, right? Like we can't really safely boost until we see it. And now we see in like a hand that just like, it's just like kind of unfortunate, honestly. It's even more sad seeing it right next to the Spark of Genius, which actually meant it was pretty much on the bottom of the deck because that Spark of Genius was one of the first cards that we picked. It's just sad, just sad. Yeah, you hate to see it, but you kind of just have to stick to the plan. If you stick to the plan of like control dash, I think you will get there on average. I think that the Starvo lists like do have some unfortunate downsides, and they definitely can brick hard. They can brick hard, which means that you can take advantage of it. And with things like the control versions of dash, the pistols, your late game will just like completely outclass them. We're gonna have a control Starvo game as well that I'll review, and that's really important, right? Because that's like, first of all, my opponent is very skilled on Starvo, but they're even more skilled on the control variant. That was what they used to win a ProQuest week 1. So being able to actually win that game, including a very bad blunder by me, greeting really hard for a boost and boosting away a Purifier, which is like the Guardian killer. That is what actually allows you to beat Guardian as Plasma Purifier, boosting away 1 and still being able to win, I think did speak a little bit to how good control dash can be into Guardian decks, specifically control variants. Like even Starvo, control dash will get there. Pistol dash, yeah, is just, it's so good. It's so good into Guardian. The problem is this is brutal. Like this is like gut wrenching, right? Like we actually had an insane end game now, right? Because we're now threatening 12 damage per turn with the pistols, and we've hit the point of our deck where we pitch stacked. Like our entire deck consistency now is mostly just blue cards, which in any other deck means you lose, but in dash means that you win, right? Like that late game is insane. And we just like life total dropped too quickly. Our opponent got too many good hits throughout the game, and so we just just kind of died, unfortunately. Like nothing left in arsenal to like use to de-react. It was a rough game. But I still think that like if you stick to the plan and just try to play as consistently and as tightly as possible with de-reactions, with pistol items, and just kind of knowing how to operate on the chain a little bit and knowing how to punish your opponent when they mess up blocking, I think will get you ahead into Starvo, especially to probably more inexperienced people. But then you still run the risk, right? Like you still run the risk of like your opponent just has the nuts. Like they're able to go like fused Oakenold and a fused Oakenold into like Crippling Crush, and there's just not much you can do. Unfortunately, you will just probably like lose those games. It's an unfortunate part of the deck. It's an unfortunate part of Dash at the moment. But on the whole, if you just kind of stick to that plan, I think that you'll be able to consistently have a good matchup into the deck, or at least like an even one, right? Like it won't be that 100% of the time. You're probably still like unfavored. It's just tough. Like Starvo is just so strong, especially into a deck like Dash, especially because they also do have disruption, right? Like if you get caught with a pistol item in hand and they like Crippling Crush you and you can't block it fully, you lose your end game. So that is a liability. That is a liability. So for Control Dash, pretty standard. We've just talked about that. And then to like recap really quickly on the boost version of Dash, it's just knowing when to close the chain and how to keep the chain open, because you obviously are incentivized to keeping the chain open as long as possible and not breaking it because of Rampart Shield. It'll just get too much value if you ever close the chain for pistol or for Teklo Heart. So you just have to be careful with it. You just got to be careful. You got to know like, and then also if you ever do need to break the chain, use everything that would break the chain, right? Like if you're gonna like play like a non-attack action or something in the middle, like just use Foundry Heart then, right? If you were even thinking about using it, because you just can't risk closing the chain that many times in one turn, or like take that opportunity and like reload your pistol, right? Because then you can attack. If you attack with the pistol, if there's already a counter on it, you don't close the chain, so you can like attack a bunch of times, you leave a counter on the pistol. Like it was like that missed lethal turn we talked about, and then you throw the pistol out and they can't reset the Rampart Shield. Do not bring in high octane. Do not bring in high octane into either versions of Dash. Do not bring it into a Rampart Shield deck. You will have a horrible time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, don't bring in T-Bone. Don't bring in T-Bone. It's not worth. Cards bad into like most decks. Cards bad in general. Not good into Guardian. They're just gonna block with Crown of Seeds. So yeah. So later, this is already starting. The controlled game. This was super grindy, so I'm just gonna take a moment and like I'll just review this at a different moment, and it'll be its own thing because I think that this will kind of play the same, but it's probably just worth reviewing on its own. So thank you for watching.